Hello, bonjour. I'm Andrew Mosker, President and CEO of National Music Center, and this is the NMC Amplifier podcast.
I got a call from, I'll never forget it, Bob at the White House is on the phone, and it was Mrs. Obama's office. And they said, look, we're very interested in working with you on music education. We love what you've done.
Today, we are so honored to have an esteemed guest and my friend for so many years, Robert Santelli, an incredible giant luminary in the world of American music, and a renowned historian specializing in popular music, so many different forms, blues, rock, and other forms as well. Robert's voice has resonated in noteworthy publications such as Rolling Stone and the New York Times. Well beyond that, though, he has penned a multitude of best-selling books about music. Prior to his current role as the founding executive director of the Grammy Museum in Los Angeles, Bob played a role in the inception of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum in Cleveland and led as CEO the Experience Music Project in Seattle. He's been instrumental in creating cultural landmarks such as the British Music Experience Exhibition and the Woody Guthrie Center, and so much more. His remarkable work was recognized with a Grammy Award for the Best Historical Album in 2020 for the Pete Seeger, the Smithsonian Folkways Collection. Friends, guests, let's give a warm welcome to my young friend that I've known for so long, that's been such a great inspiration to me and to the National Music Center's birth and inception, Bob Santelli. Bob, welcome to Amplifier.
Finally here after all these years, man. This is fantastic. Thank you for having me.
Oh, man. I'm so glad to be sitting with you here at the National Music Center in the old King Eddie Hotel, which gave birth to the story and the idea of building a National Music Center. I first met you when I was really young. I went online in the early days of the internet and typed in the words music museums and saw this link, the Music Museum Alliance. And it was having a gathering. And if I'm not mistaken, the first gathering that I met you at was in Memphis.
That's right. It was.
And that's where we met. And I didn't know anybody. And you and Rob Blount were chairing this meeting. Right, yeah. And just kind of talking about music museums. Do you remember that?
I do. And it was a great city to have it. But I have to correct you. We were called the National Music Museum Alliance. And you were from Canada.
That's
we were
right.
thinking, do we let this young whippersnapper in with us, share all our secrets?
I forgot about that. Yeah, I forgot you had the word national in there.
And you came down and you asked a million questions. You were bothering everyone with questions. How do you do this? What did you do that? And it was like, this kid, what is he doing here? And eventually, people started to embrace you. And of course, you went on to do amazing things. And I have to say, all of us, even though the organization is no longer around, I'm still friends with a lot of them, and all of them are so proud of what you've done.
Oh,
I mean, you've really outpaced all of us in a lot of ways because you have a national music center. None of us have a national anything. We have museums that we built, right? But not a national. You've gone a long way, and this is an incredible place. America should have something like this.
Well, America was, and you and all of those colleagues that you mentioned, I remember sitting at Stax, the Stax Museum, American Soul, and knowing the history of that label, not like some people know it, but certainly being inspired by the music that came from Stax.
Right.
From Booker T, the MGs, and so much more, Steve Cropper, so many great artists that came from there. And just walking around Memphis and going to Sun Studios and sitting down and having those sessions in one of the newly developed or constructed rooms at Stax and hearing everybody talk about what are music museums, what do they mean to community. And I don't remember who the executive director was at the time when we had that first meeting, but I remember the story of how the Stax Museum was really just a pile of rubble with a plaque on it. Yep. And somebody had this idea to rebuild the recording studio and the old record label and attach a charter school.
That's right, yes.
And I remember sitting there going, this is a museum of the 21st century. This is so much more than just artifacts to look at. They're there, the artifacts and the stories, but they've taken the history and used it to inspire a new generation.
That's right. Yeah.
And that was still to this day, I think Memphis was probably had the biggest impact on me. And just hearing all of your experience, I learned so much from you. What would you say, like from you've done so much in music. I mean, it's such a long list as an author, a teacher, a journalist, an academic in universities, to actually getting in your hands into programming what was then still a fairly new thing, a music.
It was.
In the 90s. What was that experience like when you got that first gig at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as the first director of programs?
You know, had there been music museums when I was a kid or a teenager, I would have said, this is what I want to do. There would have been no question about it. But there weren't. You know, it was back when I was in high school and then in university. To even have a course on popular music was a rare thing. And if there was a course, it would be some local guitar player who was saying, hey, let's listen to some more Led Zeppelin, man. Isn't this great? And there was no real contextualization, and there was nothing. But when the idea of a music museum, remember, a lot of people thought, how do you put music in a museum? They didn't, people couldn't wrap their hands around that, you know. And there were a lot of people, my colleagues, when I was a music journalist with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, would say, you going to kill rock and roll if you institutionalize this music. It's from the streets, it's from dirty clubs. You'll kill it. Of course, we didn't. And our argument was, look, if this is such an important music, it has such an impact on our culture, our generation, etc., it needs to be preserved and conserved. We're not going to kill it. We're going to use it as inspiration for future generations. And that's largely what happened with music museums.
Was the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame a challenging building and operation to open and get rolling because of where it was located? Was it difficult to get buy-in for it because it wasn't in New York or somewhere else?
Oh yeah. There were 5 of us who wrote for Rolling Stone at the time. This is like in 1993, early 1993. And Jan Wetter, who was the publisher, creator of Rolling Stone magazine, and also, along with Ahmet Ertegun, the two basically that started the concept of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Foundation. Like with your Hall of Fames here in Canada, we had a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but no place. We had the induction ceremonies, and that was it. And they were great, but there was no home for it. And so Jan Wenner and Ahmet Ertegun says we need a home for it. And of course, everyone thought it would be in New York City at the time. Expensive was the real estate. And so what was going to happen? And we ran almost like a national contest, not an official one, but USA Today did it. So where should the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame go? And for a lot of people, they thought it would be either the 2 most important early cities, either Memphis or New Orleans. It didn't pan out because money was hard to be raised down there. There were a lot of political issues. You know, out of the blue, Cleveland, Ohio says, we would like it, and we'll pay for it.
Yeah.
And that's basically, you know, it's going to make you an offer you can't refuse. That's what Cleveland was. Now, Cleveland also had some connection to rock and roll history. Alan Freed, the great rock and roll disc jockey, was from Cleveland. Allegedly, the first rock and roll concert, well, it wasn't because it was a riot and it never even happened, but it was in Cleveland, right, in the early 1950s. So there was some connection. They had a great punk scene there at the time, but they had it. Was it hard to do? We have to understand these 5 writers, we were all picked for our Rolodex and for our knowledge. And I was picked simply because at the time I had just published a book on the blues. And so I knew the blues world and the roots world. And I remember we came to Cleveland, Ohio. We were all from New York. Came from Cleveland, Ohio in the winter of 1993. And basically, there had been someone who'd been trying to collect materials for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And they laid it out on a table this size. And we went, how big is this exhibit? 50,000 square feet. You have 18 months not only to collect everything, tell the stories, but open it on time and on budget. It sounded like an impossible task. For none of us had. The only time we had gone to museums was as visitors. Nobody had museum studies background, nothing. But we learned really quick, as I'm sure you know, is that great exhibits tell stories, right? And as a journalist and as a writer, that's what we did. So it was fairly easy to make the transition. Now you have more tools. You had objects, you had films and things, interviews. And so I think most of us found it kind of easy. We knew how to write. You know, when you write wall text, you say a lot, but you only have a few words to do it. And by writing Rolling Stone record reviews, we had to be really, really tight so we could go through this stuff. And in the end, 5 of us, on time, on budget, we opened Labor Day 1995 to great acclaim. And all of a sudden, when I saw that, I said, this is what I want to do. And I left music journalism. 5 of the 5, 2 of us actually moved to Cleveland to open it. I was one of them. And that started a whole new career for me.
Yeah, just opened up all these doors in the 90s. So I would have met you short, 5 or 6, 7 years later.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, right around that time we had met in Memphis, I was really excited. I came back super inspired back to Calgary. And we were in our startup phase building, then called Cantos Music Foundation. That's right. Sort of looking after curating and public programming with a very small team, this collection of keyboard instruments and electronic instruments. The National Music Center was not an idea yet. And then I think it was the year or 2 after that, the National Music Museum Alliance convened, and it was at EMP.
That's right.
And your life had changed overnight. Next thing you know, you're the CEO of the Experience Music Project. And everyone had been, including me, again, I feel like, 20 some odd years ago, the internet was still in an early phase. And, what was ever anybody doing at that time was access to information and research. So I was frantically looking for music museum information around the world, and reading about the Experience Music Project was like, it was so far ahead, at least in vision and aspiration, of any other museum that existed, really, certainly in music. Everything about it, just even reading about it, you could tell that there was something different about it. And then when you convened at the meeting there, I still remember sitting in the JVL Theater.
That's right.
And you came out on stage, and I remember you saying, here I am, I'm not the CEO of the EMP. I was, and I think you tell me the story about that happened, because if I'm not mistaken, didn't you just go out to Seattle to do some consulting work? And the next thing you know, Paul Allen said, we want you to run the place.
The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, these journalists who became music museum curators, we all, if you will, divided up the exhibits that we had to build in 18 months. And this was the early 90s. Grunge was still happening. But back east, grunge wasn't a really cool thing yet, right?
Yeah.
And so no one wanted to do Seattle, come all the way out to Seattle. I'd never been to the Northwest before, and I'm thinking, hell, I'll do it. I'll go out, even though it was out of I did, folk, blues, country. I did all the root stuff. This was very contemporary for me, but I said, I'll do it. And I came out to Seattle, and I found the place really, there was no EMP or anything at this time. It was just a really cool city. And I went back, I didn't meet Paul Allen or anyone like that, but once we started to build the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Paul Allen, his team, he had very quietly created a team, and they would periodically check in with us, and they would be invited to come and sit in our meetings, because you've got to understand, at the time, Paul Allen was the 3rd wealthiest man in the world. And, you're always looking for donors. You run a museum, you're always thinking, wow, maybe he would support us, right? So we were very accommodated to him and his team. And then we opened. We opened in 1995, and I remember in the late fall of 1995, we were still trying to figure out how to turn on the lights. And he doesn't come, but his team, led by his sister, Jody Patton at the time, it's today Jody Allen, she brought like 15 people, and they quizzed the hell out of us as to how did you do this? And we're like, man, we got to get out there. We got people. We can't spend a whole day with you guys, but we did. We were very courteous, because it was cool that they wanted to do a museum as well. And we never heard from them again. Never heard from them. Nothing. But they kept tabs on us. And I could tell you, I remember this day as it were yesterday. I am at my daughter's lacrosse game in Shaker Heights, Ohio, totally into the game. First generation cell phone in my pocket, because, I had one, and we did, was being an executive, you had one. And so my daughter Jared is just killing it out there. And I'm totally into it. All of a sudden I get a phone call, right? It's like, oh God, who's bothering me? And the woman on the end of the line says, Mr. Paul Allen would like to speak to Bob Santelli. And I'm thinking, I had no idea, because that's a really common name.
Yeah.
And I said, who? I said, Paul Allen. I said, hold on a minute, hold on. I was like,
Watching a lacrosse game.
and then basically I said, yeah, this is Bob. And he says, Paul says, this is Paul Allen. I'm thinking, holy crap, it's that Paul Allen.
Yeah.
He said, I want you to come out and be a part of our team out here, run the place. And I remember saying, essentially, I have a staff of 3 here. I don't have any business degree. I never took a business class in my life. I don't think you want me. And he said, which was a very honoring thing for me. It was made me feel great. He says, I want you for your ideas. We'll get the people to run it, work for you. Just want your ideas. Come, help us. And I had no interest in going, be honest with you. I thought my life was going to be in Cleveland and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I loved my job, loved it. But my family hated Cleveland, as a lot of families do. I thought it was great. And we're from the East Coast. It wasn't that far away. But when the plane came for us, private plane, and my kids and everybody, and they wowed us and wined and dined us and showed us the beauty of the Pacific Northwest. My family came back, and I remember sitting and we had a great family discussion, legendary. And I said, all right, my daughter, Jaren, who was a senior, trying to get into Brown, had getting scholarships all over the place for lacrosse and swimming. And I said, I'm going to let Jaren make the decision here because she's a senior. She's got a boyfriend, try to go to school. And I said, what do you want to do? And she looked at me. She said, Dad, if we don't go, I'm coming home twice a year. I'm coming home for Christmas and Mom's birthday.
Wow. She's going to Seattle without you.
We went. And then we didn't look back. And so, we're still out there, and it changed my life. It taught me, I walked in, I had about 300 people under me, about a $50 million budget, 27 direct reports. I walked, I was just like, I went home that first day and went, oh man, in trouble.
From like here to here. I still
rocket ship.
I still remember being there with you when you still had that big staff at E&P and the artist journey ride was still there, and all of the exhibits that had opened with, and the Frank Gehry design, and everyone was paying attention to that because it was just a new type of institution that no one had ever really understood. Right?
It was an active. Give all credit to Paul Allen. He wanted an active experience. He felt too many museums were passive and look at things on the wall. That's not, and that's it. He wanted you to get involved, which is in part why we called it the Experience Music Project. Yeah. Want you to experience the music, and it's a project, meaning it's never ever done. We'll invent ourselves and reinvent. I thought, wow, what a cool idea.
It's a great idea.
Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was very traditional, is a very traditional museum. It's a history museum. We didn't want to be a history museum. We wanted to get inside the music, which was a phenomenal and really radical idea for museums at the time. So that's really the very first museum that demonstrated how immersive displays and interactive aspects could make the experience go from A to Z, and people walk away going, that was amazing.
Yeah, and it continues to have an impact. All of us in this field still are searching for that. Yeah, the immersives, the interactives, the way to connect with people through music that is beyond the artifact. And so when I was at E&P and all those years ago with the Alliance, I was most people didn't even know who Paul Allen was. Paul Allen and Bill Gates founded Microsoft.
That's right.
These were two legendary pioneers in the tech world who built one of the first massive software companies. And so Paul Allen was, a musician, was interested in so many things. What was it like to work for the late Paul Allen now? Yeah. Because what E&P transitioned, we'll get into this in a minute, but E&P had a lot of, it was focused on American music primarily, but then it started to transition to things like science fiction and it's still, and then changed its name again ultimately after you left. What was it like to work with such a wealthy and visionary leader like Paul Allen? So what was that experience like?
He first of all, he treated me great. I'll always be grateful for the opportunity. He didn't have to pick me. Anybody would have gone out there easily to do what I was able to do. He was a man who First of all, I can tell you, even though he was a founder of Microsoft, he was a rock and roller in a heart. And I asked him once, I said, I don't know a whole lot about this computer stuff and the internet and all the stuff you're so involved in, but so where did you get the inspiration? And he said, that's easy. Jimi Hendrix. Yeah. He said, Jimi Hendrix. I said, Jimmy, I know you're a guitar player, Paul. And Hendrix was from Seattle, and he saw him as a kid. Yeah. He said, but he thought out of the box all the time. Think of what he did musically. He says, that's what I wanted to do with my life and with computers and things. And it made so much sense. Yeah. He was a hard man to please because his ambition and his expectations were very, very high. So, I have to say, his sister, Jody Patton, who now is back to her original maiden name, Jody Allen, she was my direct boss, and I loved working with her. She was hard, but she pushed me. She pushed us. Never were we able to relax. It was push, better, never happy. And it just taught me a ton. And
became a CEO.
Yeah.
Executive. Really did.
I really didn't like that position. I wanted to be in the trenches, so I made sure I was artistic director as well. Yeah. But, Paul was such a late 60s kind of guitar guy, Hendrix, Page, Clapton. And I just remember one day, this is a perfect example of working for him. I said, we want to do an exhibit on disco. And he just said to me, are you freaking kidding me?
Wow.
Disco? Are you kidding? I said, no one has done it. I had my whole curatorial team say, tell him, this is radical. We should do it. And he did not like that idea at all. But he said, do you think we should do this? And I said, I definitely do. He always wanted early on to get us, wanted a review in the New York Times. And he always said, come on, use your, those guys. We're all the way out in Seattle. I don't know. We did disco, and we got the review in the New York Times, a very positive one, because, of course, New York was part of the birthplace of disco, so they were interested. And I did take it to New York City, to Lincoln Center, the exhibit. And it was curated by Ann Powers, who's now at NPR, and her husband, and they did a great job. And Paul came up to me, at the opening, and he says, this is not my music. He says, but I'm glad we did it, and thank you for convincing me.
Amazing.
And I thought, wow, you didn't have to tell me that. So he was a great guy. I would have stayed there. I mean, I loved working with them. We did the Science Fiction Hall of Fame, and then we wanted to do an aircraft museum, and I finally said, Paul, I'm not a science fiction guy. I'm a historian. I look back, not forward, and I'm a music guy. And so, you need somebody else to do this. He understood. And I joined his board, EMP board, for a number of years. We remained friends, and it was one of the most important experiences in my life.
Amazing. I mean, just such an influential person in the global movement around the advancement of the internet, software, and just, his name, when he passed away, I thought about you because, and EMP in its early roots, because it had a big impact again on the National Music Center. From Stax to EMP, all of these influences and meeting you and learning from you, all these ideas, we brought them back to Calgary and filed them away. Yeah. And eventually they became something. When you shortly after another gathering of the Alliance, it might have been one of the last ones, you had shared with everyone that an opportunity opened up for you in LA to be the founding executive director of the Grammy Museum. Again, the Grammys never had a physical space. Because you were at Grammy for a long time.
I was, 18 years, almost 18 years. I had been a member of the Recording Academy as a music journalist, and I wrote liner notes. So that's how I wasn't a musician anymore. I was a liner note writer, and therefore I qualified to be a part. And at the time, I was also vice president of the final chapter that was made in the Recording Academy, which was the Pacific Northwest chapter. For years, the whole grunge thing revolted against Grammy. They didn't want any part of us, but finally they came around and understood there was value there, and so I was the vice president of that chapter. And one day, out of the blue, people from LA came up and said they wanted to see the place, and I took them around EMP, so getting ideas, because we got to build a museum. And then about 3 days later, Neil Portnow, who was the chairman of the Recording Academy, a good friend of mine, and he said, is there any chance you'd be interested in coming? And I said, funny you should ask, because I'm kind of done here. And I went to school at USC, and they lived in LA 2 different times as a journalist. I knew LA, loved LA in Southern California. And so I said, I'll come. I started to get this reputation as a guy who kind of created, that this would have been number 3 now for me, And most people, as you know, because you're very different as well, like me, most of the people who build museums, who create them with their team, they build it, they open the doors, make sure everything's working, and they move on. They're builders. They don't run it. They're not the administrators necessarily. It's rare for someone, especially to stay for a long period of time, like you did and I. But I did. I drank the Kool-Aid when I got down there, because it was going to be built in downtown LA, which at the time was not a place that you would want to build anything. It was bad news down there. But LA Live was ready to just explode. And I saw, wow, this could really make a difference. I was told, if you can just put this museum into these reconverted office space, we'll then have a capital campaign and build a building. So I envisioned, well, all right, we'll start here. Well, and when I left, we're still in that space because downtown LA, it just exploded and the real estate just went off the charts. And it was another place I thought I'd stay forever, but my wife didn't necessarily like LA. LA is a tough place, for those who you don't live there and you're in the music business there. It's a young man's game, and it's fast, and it's nonstop, and at some point it was just like, okay, I've kind of done this, and I was looking for a change. And so I said, okay, well, especially when I had a chance to create something that's very close to my heart, the Bruce Springsteen Archives and Center for American Music in my home state of New Jersey.
Yeah.
So I said, that's a good segue for me to leave. And
I want to come back to Springsteen in a second here. Running the Grammy Museum in a place like LA, where there's so many artists and producers and record executives there, was that helpful to get the artists in the industry involved? Was that like a significant underpinning of the programming at the Grammy Museum?
Absolutely. You got to understand, we opened our doors in 2008, the Great Recession. So here we have a Great Recession, and I am in basically the worst part of town. I mean, the worst. Tourists did not come, not yet. And I was really hurting at the door. I needed something to bring people downtown, to give us our place on the cultural landscape of LA. And I realized there were so many musicians that lived in town. I had a really cool 200-seat theater, and I created something called An Evening With Brian Wilson, an evening with John Mellencamp, an evening with whomever. And that baby took off. And that's the thing. It's still going on today. They're well over their 1,000th performance. We could basically get an artist that could literally roll out of bed and get there 5 miles away.
Yeah.
There was no cost to fly him in. It's the only place on the planet where I could have done that, because there were so many artists there. And it just took off. And it was kind of like inside the actor's studio, if you know what that is. It meets MTV Unplugged. So basically, I was a journalist. I felt very comfortable interviewing people on stage. I did the interview, and then I turned it over to them. They do about a 40-minute set in a very intimate setting, very intimate, in a great sounding room. And boy, it just took off. So I probably did about 500 or 600 of those. Everyone from Barbra Streisand, Placido Domingo. My very first one was the hardest one I did, and I went with that because my journalist colleague said, "You're out of your mind. You are so out of your mind." I started with Brian Wilson.
Oh, God.
Who was one of my idols. But of course, Brian had some issues, and usually did interviews with answers like, yep, nope. And I had to go 45 to 50 minutes with him. And somehow I got him to talk, and
What was it? How did you get it?
I have no idea. To this day, it's a blur to me, because I was so focused. When I do these interviews, they're not really interviews, they're more like conversations. Yeah. And so I don't have notes in front of me. So as you're answering, I'm thinking about the next one. I'm trying to play everything. It requires a lot of concentration. And so I don't know how it happened. All I know is about 4 or 5 days later, the Brian Wilson team asked me to go on the road, so I would do all the interviews with Brian for his promotion of his album. I said,
Amazing.
I'm running the museum. But then after that, it started to happen.
So did the first one out of the 500 you did or so, does that one still stick out? Or
For that reason, because it was the first, it was the hardest. But no, there were some great highlights. I mean, James Taylor, Sting, Smokey Robinson, Solomon Berg. When people say, who did you interview? Is that without sounding like egotistical? I say, well, ask me who I did, that kind of thing. Taylor Swift, Lady Gaga.
I was curious. I just finished watching not that long ago, throughout COVID, everyone was binging on Netflix. Clive Davis is the soundtrack of your life. And the Clive Davis Theater is at the Grammy Museum. Were you involved in that naming?
He named it before we opened. We were looking for money because a company called AEG, Insurance Entertainment, right? You know them, along with Live Nation being great concert production companies and the creator of arenas. They lent the Recording Academy the money and basically told me, we'll support you for 10 years. If you go in the red, we'll cover you. But after 10 years, you're on your own. And then it was after 7 years, you're on your own. And then, so essentially, we had to go out and raise the money to pay it back. And Clive is has great relationship with the Recording Academy. He always has the most famous party the night before the Grammys, still to this day. And so we asked him, look, we'd love to have you here permanently. How about naming it? And he said, yeah, he would do that.
That's amazing.
So that's how it became.
In the documentary, which I've watched, the Clive Davis Theater is part of the documentary, and the sort of the trajectory of his life from Columbia Records to still to this day in his 80s or 90s, working as the creative director for Sony Music. He's still involved in the industry, still listening to songs.
Yep.
It was a real inspirational story to watch about someone who has committed their life to music, and in a way that he's well known because of all the artists that he's worked with, but another type of person that's helped build, a cultural canon of music for the world,
Right.
And I think of the work that, that you've done to really elevate American music into public education, into the forefront. I mean, there's like Tony Bennett used to always say that American music jazz is like our classical music from Europe. But it's taken someone like you and these various institutions that you've been involved in programming and building and launching and operating to really help America understand the incredible cultural and musical impact that they've had internationally. And Canada Canada can sometimes suffer from an inferiority complex and not bragging about its accomplishments, and some of the biggest ambassadors that Canada's created are artists.
No doubt.
And many of them happen to be musicians and who had left Canada to go to the U.S., Leonard Cohen, Joni Mitchell, Robbie Robertson, the band, and the list goes on, Neil Young, and many others. And Canada still to this day claims them, as their own. And there are still very proud Canadians, a lot of those artists. And the creation of a facility like the National Music Center was really following the lead that I think you and many others in the U.S. said, finally, we need to put a bricks and mortar organization together that builds educational programs for young people and really shares these stories with young people and old so they know where they come from. You said earlier, you're a historian primarily. We often say here at the NMC, we like to use history to make history, but if you don't know anything about your history, you have no reference point, and I found touring all of these facilities with you and the National Music Museum Alliance, which eventually became the National Music Museum Alliance with one Canadian member.
That's true. You were
the only Canadian member. And seeing all of these, amazing places, not only did we go to Memphis more than once, Seattle, Kansas City, we really got a chance. Went to Kansas City, the Charlie Parker Museum, and really got a chance to see how these different communities around America had these really special stories. In many cases, had global influence.
Yeah.
So when you think about education, because education has been central to all of your experiences. What role do you think it has now in the future in music museums, specifically the role of education for any age, not just young students, but even the general public?
Yeah, the continuing education. I think it's huge, Andrew. And if I didn't, I would not be here today. And what I mean by that is, if someone were to say to me, okay, one word, define who you are, one word, I'd say teacher. Because the exhibits, the programs, the book, everything is designed to teach people to, I always use my 3 eyes. This when I started to really create and visualize what a museum ought to be from the ground up, like you did with this, I did, where I was involved in every single aspect, which was the Grammy Museum. You did it here. I said, the first thing is I want to inform. I want to inform people, get information to you so that you can contextualize and make your own opinions. Second, I want to interpret. You can go online and get all the information you want to read a book, but I want to interpret it. I want to put a slant on it. I want to give it a fresh take or something that you would agree or not agree on. The third thing I wanted to do was inspire. So I want to inform, interpret, and inspire. And if I always thought of that as I built these museums, that's what I wanted. I want to give you information. I want to interpret it. That's why you came here, to hear a point of view. Whether you agree with it or not, that's okay. You're thinking about music. And I want to inspire you, if nothing else, to become a more sophisticated listener. The most important thing I see with museums in particular is that we, Canada, the U.S., there's always been great musicians coming up. We got them. You have them. We have them. But what's really starting to fall are the audiences, right? You can't keep a healthy, musically creative community going without an audience to support it, to buy the music, to go to the concerts, to buy the T-shirts, to commodify this music so these people can live. And so I happen to believe that music museums are a great incubator for future audiences. When I take 8th graders through, those are the kids 20 years from now, hopefully buying the concert tickets so that they can see, and so that their artists can support them, and they can support themselves, I should say. I'd see that the most important. I'm not really interested in preaching to the choir or the converted. If you've been a Beatles fan for 50 years, that's great, and you can come and see the exhibit. I love it. But I'm really interested in your grandkid. I want to make sure he understands it. And that's the thing that fuels me, why I'm still really interested in all of this stuff. It's not a job, it's a mission. It is a mission for me. And what I try to do with my staff is make it as much of a mission for them as I can. And the way you do that is by articulating that vision, as I'm sure you have done here. You had to, because when I walk around this place and I see, you have to understand, I mean this, what you have created physically here and the interactives and things, it dwarfs a lot of what we've done in the States. I mean, you've been to the museums, but you haven't been to them recently. You should go back and see how your museum here compares. We have a lot to learn from you and from what you've done here in Calgary. It's really, really special. So much so that I want to be left alone tomorrow and walk around and steal some ideas.
I've stolen lots of ideas from you over the years. The least we can do is reciprocate, we are neighbors. And
that's for sure.
And friends.
Yep.
Hey, sorry for the interruption. I just have a quick favor to ask. If you enjoy the show, please take a moment to give us the highest rating you can on your podcast app. Or if you're watching on YouTube, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us out. National Music Center is a registered charity with a mission to amplify the love, sharing, and understanding of music, and we rely on donor support to achieve this mission. If you like this show or anything else the National Music Center is doing, please consider leaving a donation by following the link in the description. I feel like one thing that I remember you talked about years ago was this, how to be really national, like you tried to do, like you did with the Grammy Museum, created these satellite co-locations in Mississippi and New Jersey. I remember chatting with you about India was an idea, China was an idea. It seems like a decade or more ago, but I still remember those conversations. Yeah. You really had a global view of the important story, the American music story, being you utilize for educational purposes around the world. You had mentioned also that you had struck, I think it was a National Education Advisory Committee, if I'm not mistaken. Tell me a little bit about what that was again, and what was the original intent was.
Again, the education. I wanted to make sure that the programs we created, the exhibits that we created, were educationally relevant for teachers. I wanted them to see the museum as an educational resource. And the idea, especially in the U.S., where we have so much music and there's so much a reflection on our national identity, that why not take this music? It's the common denominator. You, teacher, listen to music. So do your students. Use that as a way to teach in a new way. Use music to help teach literature or social studies or sociology, certainly history or Black history, whatever. There's many opportunities. I've worked with teachers in math, in statistics, who basically did analyses of the pop charts, etc. It's great stuff. That's, again, an important part of any music museum, in my opinion, certainly ones I've developed. And so in order to do that, you have to talk to teachers. And so I figured we create this National Teacher Advisory Board that they will advise me and my team what they need. How can I serve you, teacher? That's the question here. And then we broke them down into regions and locals. So I've never let go of my relationship with teachers. To me, that is the lifeblood, because clearly, as I said before, it's great to have the super fan come and see an exhibit or the museum. That's almost like a given. There's no challenge there for me. You're going to love it. I think hopefully you will, and you'll go back and tell people to come. But how about that 8th grader or that junior in high school? How do I get them? And the most rewarding thing you can get, 5, 6 years, I get them. Emails from someone says, I went on a class trip, or I did this, and now I'm in the music business, or now, I have a great music collect, whatever. It's the most rewarding thing you can get, So that's the educational relevancy of what you do is paramount in my book.
Did it take a long time to coordinate all of those teachers from different parts of the U.S.?
Oh, yeah. And it was bumpy roads, yeah. But we did our best. I mean, I started this at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because what I didn't say earlier when we talked about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I was a curator at the start. But because I had teaching experience and I was interested in education, they said, would you mind taking off your curator's hat and become the first director of education? And I said, yeah, I would love to do that. Yeah. And so I created something there called the National Teacher Institute, where I brought 300 or 400 teachers from all over the country. And remember, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in the mid-1990s was a big deal. It's a big deal. And so teachers would come, they'd stay. We had dorms in the area college. They would stay, or hotels. And basically, for about 8 days, we would teach them how to incorporate music in their classroom.
That's incredible. That was so innovative for its time.
Yeah,
in the 90s. For its time in the 90s. It's incredible.
It was, and it worked. And they became ambassadors. So they came from Iowa, Texas, Missouri, California. And all of a sudden, I had other teachers call. I had an overwhelming, we did 2 teacher institutes. It was just, and like I said, I had all these ideas on how I would just simply grow this thing. And, Paul Allen came knocking, and I left, unfortunately, too abrupt, but that place had to be open, and I had to go. But I never lost my love or respect connection to Cleveland, Ohio, because they gave me all of these opportunities to do this.
I wanted you to share that story really for the podcast, because I think it's a timeless lesson, I think, for anybody that runs any kind of museum or arts education center or arts facility where education is paramount to the programming, to really involve the teachers wherever they're from, locally, regionally, or across your country. It's an excellent example. The move from the Grammy Museum to so many other projects, there's 2 other things I really want to touch on. One, the relationship to the Bruce Springsteen Archives, which you're the executive director and now at Monmouth University, New Jersey, in your home state. And then I remember you were still in LA, and you got a call from Barack Obama's team, or you called them, or you sent them a proposal, and it was, following in this tradition where musicians would come and perform at the White House, which had been a long-standing tradition with many American presidents. And I think you had sent the Obama administration a proposal
No,
Was it the other way around? Okay, so I want you to tell the story because I remember one story you told me that you were writing the proposal on your computer and you lost the whole thing. You didn't save it or something happened and you had to rewrite the whole thing and you got it in time.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, the show happened at the White House. So please tell that story because it's such an incredible story about I think, the culmination of all the work that you had done in your career in music museums. And then suddenly you've curated an experience at the White House for Barack Obama and their team and brought all these artists from around the U.S. in different genres of American popular music to basically celebrate American popular music with Obama, the administration. That to me is such a powerful story in just arts public policy and government relations in general. I really wanted you to have that story on this podcast.
Well, it's an interesting story. First of all, I must say one name you forgot there that plays a prominent role, and that is the First Lady, Michelle Obama.
There you go.
And I'll explain why. But very quickly, we had opened the Grammy Museum in just prior to the election of Barack Obama. And in that summer, I had a premonition, man, I think he's going to win. So I did something. We changed horses. And I created an exhibit called Songs of Conscience, Sounds of Freedom, which is basically the story of music in the civil rights era, how music can act as an agent for cultural, political change in our country. And for some reason, I can't remember exactly how this happened, but someone from the White House or someone from public television basically happened to be in LA, came to this new thing called the Grammy Museum, saw this, and took it back to Mrs. Obama's office. And Mrs. Obama, at the time, unbeknownst to me, was interested in music education. Now, you have to understand, you guys know this, everyone knows this, the Obamas are huge music fans, huge. And this program called In Performance at the White House began during the Jimmy Carter administration. And some presidents really used it. Some, like George W. Bush, didn't use it at all but once. Well, the Obamas were definitely going to use it because they were huge fans. And so basically I got a call from, I'll never forget it. I had a young Latina, just out of college, assistant, and she gets a phone call and she says to me, Bob, the White House is on the phone. And I'm thinking, somebody's jacket. White House, yeah. It's probably my brother or somebody.
Yeah.
No, it was really the White House. And it was Mrs. Obama's office. And they said, look, we're very interested in working with you on music education. We love what you've done. And would you be interested? And you have this exhibit on civil rights, and we're really interested in bringing that to the White House. And I said, yeah, of course. And I'm thinking, why didn't they go to Smithsonian or Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Us? We're still in diapers. Yeah, well, I don't. We're not even 2 years old yet. But we jumped at it. And then we got the call from PBS, and PBS says, no, we're going to turn this thing into an in-performance at the White House. Would you be interested in executive producing this show celebrating music of the civil rights era? I grabbed Ken Ehrlich, who was the producer that created the Grammy Awards, the great shows. And I said, you want to do this with me? He says, hell yeah. So we get a call then from... I get a call. Everything's going along, and I'm thinking this is going to be amazing. I get a call from the White House again. This time it's someone from the president's office. And the president said, the president would love for you to have Bob Dylan come to the White House. And I'm thinking, this is gone. Forget it. I had written a book about Bob Dylan. I'd done a big exhibit with Martin Scorsese on Bob Dylan. When I was at Experience Music Project, I'm thinking that's why they're putting this together. That's why they really asked me, thinking I could get Dylan to the White House. No one's going to get Dylan to the White House. I said, all right, I'll try, but no, I can't guarantee it. I said, I go through the motions. I called Dylan's manager, who I knew, Jeff Rosen, and I said, I know what the answer to this is, but I'm going to ask because it's pretty cool. It's, there was silence on the phone. He said, oh, man, let me ask Bob. You might be interested in this. I'm thinking, are you kidding? I thought it would be, come on, what are you wasting my time on? Click. Nope. He asked Bob, and about 3 weeks later, it took a long time, he said, Bob wants to do this. And I said, wow. My God. Well, now it's real. But not only, are we going to the White House to do education program with the First Lady, produce this music of the Civil Rights show, but to bring Bob Dylan to the White House. Incredible. Wow, who was one of the most important people in my life as a kid growing up. And it happened. And that led, it was a great show. As you said before, writing out the proposal on how the show could be, lost it. That just makes me feel terrible.
I remember that story. I remember
that. Oh, man. But anyway, we got there. It was a great show. And that led to, I think, 12 other shows. So we did a lot. And I'll always, always, always be forever grateful for the Obamas. They treated me like special and had faith in me when, no one had done this before. They had never been. In the end, we brought 2,000 kids over the course of 8 years to the White House. And Mrs. Obama and myself and the whole stream of artists from Justin Timberlake, Demi Lovato, Smokey Robinson, Mick Jagger, all participating in education programs. I'll close with this because it's the coolest part. At Smokey Robinson there, a bunch of African-American kids who came for the program. And I heard this later. And so what we did was this time we broke the kids up with each of the artists so they could write a song. So this kid had a chance with a group of 3 to write a song with Smokey Robinson. And so when her mother, he goes home and the mother says, as I heard the story, "So you're at the White House. What did you do? Was that great?" And everything. He said, "Yeah." He said, "What did you do?" "Well, I wrote a song with Smokey Robinson." It's like, what? And it was that kind of thing, It was more than just being in the White House. It was the opportunity. And that, all credit, that went to Mrs. Obama. It was her idea to do it. We pulled it off, but it was her idea. So every one of those, she was in the pit with us, man. Fantastic woman, just amazing. And him too. I mean, she used to let us do these shows. It was crazy.
Again, I can't overemphasize, the work that you've done at really taking this American art form, which has had such a huge influence all over the world. And I don't want to say the word like legitimizing it because it's not the right word, but giving it its proper recognition. And just through all of your work right into the White House. I mean, that is just such an important way to put a megaphone to this music and in terms of its identity to culture. And just having that, in this case, Michelle Obama and Barack Obama's administration and them support that. Wow, that's just such an incredible, that must make you feel like one of the capstones of, and you're still a young man and you still got lots to do. I get that, but when I think of...
Got a lot to do. I'm not that young, but you got a lot to do.
You got a lot to do. You can live a long time still. You must look at that. I mean, I certainly look at that as just what an incredible journey that has been for you. I mean, you must have been so proud after each of those shows, and sometimes pitching yourself.
Absolutely. I picture myself now,
just thinking
about it. No one's done this before. And for me, I got lucky. I don't know, call it what you will. But to have an opportunity to become the unofficial historian of the White House, music historian, it's like, can't even dream that stuff, but even more importantly than that, to see these kids who we pay for, we raise the money, bring all these kids from Mississippi, Louisiana, North Dakota, all over the place, who never had a chance to go to Washington, D.C., let alone the White House, and when Mrs. Obama and the president came on stage, it was like the Beatles, right? They were so held in such high regard. It was incredible. And to have every music, there wasn't one musician who turned me down when I asked, not one. We've had, these were multi-artist shows. Willie Nelson even came in, and the kids didn't know, who is this guy? Whoa, is he old? And before you know it, it was like Grandpa telling stories. They loved him. They absolutely loved him. So yeah, all of these things that, get invited to a state dinner, to do it. And then really from that kind of work and also work with the State Department to be able to go to be the only person who ever did an American music exhibit in the Kremlin. I mean, I was just lucky enough to parlay one thing to the next and seize the opportunity and take advantage of it and know fully that I'm here representing not only my music, but my country. You better do a damn good job.
I did. Well, amazing. I mean, it's just everything, all of your stories are just so inspiring to anyone that works in a music museum environment, works in a cultural environment where programming and inspiring people through education, through whatever art form, in this case, music, and how important it could be and how I think universal it is, in this case, right up into the White House. I want to talk about a couple more things. That the transition from the Grammy Museum, working with the White House, into coming back to your home state, and certainly an artist that's had such a profound effect on both of us, you more so probably than me, but me more as a music fan, Bruce Springsteen. So your relationship with Bruce Springsteen goes back really to the fact that you're about the same age and you're from roughly the same part of New Jersey. You both have a history of music and a history of surfing. It's in both of your lives, growing up on the shore, on the Jersey Shore. So how did the transition come from the Grammy Museum to your relationship with Springsteen? Now, did you always have a professional music relationship with Springsteen as a writer, as a journalist, and then throughout the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, EMP, Grammy, did you always have a professional relationship with Springsteen that just ultimately culminated in this now becoming the executive director of the Springsteen Icarus? What's the Springsteen journey in your life?
But when I was a teenager, I'm a little younger than Bruce, but not much. I was in bands as well when he was working at, and he was the guy on the Jersey Shore when I was a teenager, the late 60s, early 70s. And so I knew who he was. I'd go to the clubs where he'd play. He was our local rock star. But clearly, and I knew him and I met him, but it really wasn't until I was a journalist. And I have to be honest, as a music journalist, I rode Bruce Springsteen's coattails. I was a Jersey Shore guy, Italian-American, surf community. There's a lot of, you're in the family, so to speak, And so I got the interviews with the E Street Band guys or with Bruce when others couldn't. And that was huge for me. So it allowed me a career in music journalism. I always go back to that. The whole concept of Bruce, the relationship. I wrote a book with Max Weinberg called The Big Beat, drummer in the E Street Band, about the history of rock drumming. And that led to a book. It never happened because the keyboard player in the E Street Band, Danny Federici, passed when we were doing a book. But then Bruce asked me to do a book with him, a book called Songs. Everyone thinks Born to Run is his first. It really wasn't. In the late 90s, he did a book called Songs. It was a book about his lyrics and how he wrote, exploration of his creative process. So I had this long-time connection. He always treated me great. When I needed an interview, he gave it to me. Never forgot it. What happened, though, over the last, about 7 or 8 years ago, I started getting calls from the Smithsonian, who had relationships with, had worked with them, Library of Congress, same deal, and Rock and Roll Hall of Fame said, hey, would you do us a favor, kind of get us with Bruce? We'd love to get his papers. At some point, he's going to have to do something with his papers. Yeah. And I started to think, I said, man, I ain't going to be the one who was responsible for Bruce Springsteen's papers leaving Jersey. It'd be a hit on me, I can't do this. So I'm thinking, how do I handle this?
That's good.
And I said, it's going to stay. We're going to keep him in Jersey. I went back to my alma mater, which is where I first met Bruce, Monmouth University. At the time when I went there was Monmouth College. 100 yards away from the campus is where Bruce wrote Born to Run. So he had the connection. His first generation fans were at the university. I went to the university, gave him my idea, loved it, said, I will donate property. I go to Bruce to tell him, and John Landau's manager. And Bruce says to me, he says, it's a great idea, but no. He says, I am just a chapter in the ongoing story of American music. I'm not a chapter, the book. I'm a chapter. And I knew, just because he's a pretty humble guy, I knew that something like that would happen. I didn't think he'd go for it. So I had something in my back pocket. And I said, well, funny you should say that, because what I really would like to do is the Bruce Springsteen Archives and Center for American Music. There's been no center for you. Have it here in Canada. We don't. Crazy. And he said, and then I remember him, we're sitting at his farm in New Jersey, silence. And I'm thinking, he's going to figure out how to say no. He's thinking about a new song to write, or he likes it. And he said, literally, let's go see the spot where you want to build this. he gets on his motorcycle. I get in the car, and we go. It was about 8 miles away or so to Monmouth University. I said, right here. And he looked around. He said, it'll do. Got back on his motorcycle, went home, and John Landau was mad at it. I says, is this a yes? He says, oh yeah, it's a yes. And that was it. We started it. And so we have been collecting, and we just created something that premiered in April called the American Music Honors, which Bruce and Steve Van Zandt and others that are close to me and know their music, to acknowledge and honor people who have been honored, but maybe not to the point we think they should have. And so that's an annual event of ours, and we're building a building at some point in time to house everything. And I can still come back to Jersey and still eat pizza and Italian food. No one's gonna bother me.
No one's gonna bother you. Take home some tomatoes.
Right, exactly.
You're from your friend's garden.
Yeah, that's right.
What are the plans for that building? I mean, is there a site? Is there a fundraising campaign? Is there a timeline to open?
Yeah, we're working on all of that now. We hope to have an announcement sometime very soon as to what will be, because there is right now exists the Bruce Springsteen Archives at Center for American Music. It's just that it's in a small building on the campus of Monmouth University, and it is exploding at the seams. We have already 35,000 pieces, not including all of Bruce's stuff. I mean, it's a tremendous amount of stuff, because fans if there's anyone who listens to this podcast who's from New Jersey, they will understand this. Bruce is, if he ran for governor, he'd win unanimously. I think. I mean, he's so beloved. He's so much a product of who we are. You mentioned before about inferiority complex Canada has. Well, not like Jersey had. You have to understand that Johnny Carson, our great late night host, like 4 nights out of the 5 he was on, he'd make fun of New Jersey for our pollution, of mafia, just all the things. And it wasn't until Bruce Springsteen came along, my generation, baby boom generation, that we began to rise above that, because he was someone who was beloved all over, and he was like the William Faulkner of our he wrote about Jersey. Yeah. We're proud. People were proud. It just changed everything. So to create this Bruce Springsteen Archives Center for American Music, to have him deeply involved in it, is an honor for me. I mean, I'm from Jersey. I'm from the Jersey Shore. I went to Monmouth University, and like I said, I rode Bruce Springsteen's coattails in my career. I tied this whole thing up. This is my uber mission. Amazing. To really do this. More important than anything else I've ever done.
I'd like to understand a bit more about the Center for Music. This is the Bruce Springsteen Archives, and then the Center of Music. What's its aspiration and its goal to do? What does it set out to accomplish?
Essentially, it is meant to be a clearinghouse for exhibitions, programs. We're not creating a collection. Like you're the National Music Center of Canada. We don't have anything like that in America. We got like 50 music museums, right? But so you got country here, blues here, bluegrass there, folk here. We don't have anything in Washington, D.C. So this is the next best thing. So we will create exhibitions coming out of there. We're already doing it. We got 3 already under our belt since I left the Grammys last year. And we are aspiring to become a clearinghouse for information on American music, programs, exhibits, and education. So we're a 21st century Center for American Music, because we're not the Smithsonian where you're going to see thousands of artifacts, but because of our relationships, mine in particular, with artists, we borrow them to tell the story. I don't know. I'm hoping that I'm going to lay the foundation, and someone's really going to build this legacy. That's my goal, is to make that foundation really strong, so whatever is built is long-lasting and impactful, and not just in America, but beyond, because as you say, our music is known throughout the world. I help consult on the Indian music experience, and the amount of American music I heard in Bombay and all these other places was unbelievable. So it's meant to basically, this is where the story is kept, right, until something bigger and better and more permanent comes along. And in the meantime, Bruce abroad is like the poster boy for what many people believe America ought to be. You know, the aspiration of our ideals are amazing. And of course, we get some black eyes for good reasons around the country, for other reasons. But Bruce is, when he goes, I'm going to go over to Italy and see him next month. Can't wait. There, it's like, I mean, I always thought the best place to see Bruce Springsteen, of course, was Jersey. No more. It's Italy.
It's Italy.
Oh,
well,
yeah.
He's got Italian roots, right?
He does.
You
And
know,
boy,
and the
they
Italians know
recognize
that.
that.
When
Oh,
the
yeah.
Italians come home to Italy, they
That's
know
it.
that you're an Italian.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, they know
Oh,
welcome
yeah.
home, right?
Yeah.
So I think the story of your story, your journey through all of these different chapters, culminating with the home state of New Jersey and the Bruce Springsteen Archives and the Center for Music,
Yeah.
and its aspiration is that where you think the future of music museums needs to go, given all of your experience? What do you see as being critical to the survival of these organizations and institutions, and as it relates to their purpose going forward? What's your view on that?
Yeah.
Looked into the
First things I'll say, number one, first of all, every country where music is an important cultural asset, resource, reflection, ought to have a National Music Center. So you and what you have here is an inspiration for me. It really is, because I always dreamt of a place in Washington, D.C. on the Mall. I mean, if this is our greatest cultural treasure, why aren't we celebrating that? Thousands of people would be coming to see. You tell the full story of American music. Whoa. So I would recognize that is hugely missing in America. Huge. And I'm hoping at some point to see that. Second thing is that music museums, in America in particular, they've kind of hit their mark now. There are a lot of them. It covers pretty much every major American music form. The only place that's missing it, as I think I was telling you earlier in the day, is New Orleans. And we're working to try and get something in New Orleans. It's the most musical of American cities. It should have a major center, because so much came. Everything, just jazz now. Try R&B, try hip hop, it has everything. And then if you go beyond New Orleans, Cajun, Zydeco, it gets crazy. So you need a National Music Center, I believe, okay? The music museums, as I know them and built them, they're over. One left, New Orleans. Now it's going toward centers, education centers about legendary seminal artists. So there are now 3 in America. The very first one, very small, but it was the first, was the Buddy Holly Center in Lubbock, Texas. Great idea, but small, and it never got the attention it should have. They were part of the National Music Museum Alliance. Second one that I did, the Woody Guthrie Center in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The third is the Bob Dylan Center, also in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The Springsteen Archives and Center for American Music will be the fourth. I don't know how many more there will be. Maybe at some point, and I don't know, maybe Sinatra could have one, or certainly the Beatles could have one in the UK. But I think that's where it's going, and very bullish on education, research, centers, archives, making sure that artist is a true reflection of the music and the culture that they came from. That, I think, is the future.
Bob, I wanted to, again, thank you for the incredible contributions you have made to music and education in the world. You know, for your own inspiration coming from New Jersey, and as a journalist, to becoming a curator, to an executive, to a champion of music, American music, and all music.
Yeah.
You've been such a significant inspiration, not only to myself. I give you deserve credit for this National Music Center here in Canada. You were an incredible inspiration to me, and I was just grateful to meet you at the right time in the right place, and take your energy and bring it here and share it with supporters and champions here in our organization at our donor level, this incredible staff that we've been able to amass here at the NMC. A lot of your inspiration, I guess I have a good memory, and I know how to see a mentor when I see one. You've been a great mentor to me, and I know a lot of people, not just me, but certainly to me. And I could see through the individuals that we've attracted to either work here or volunteer, the staff that have come from afar to work at Canada's National Music Center, have all been inspired by your work. maybe unknowingly. But the reason I really wanted to do this podcast was to capture your story and the impact you've had, again, on me, and now the ripple impact you've had on so many of the staff and volunteers and the artists in this country, now in Canada, who I think, to your point about the future, will benefit from the work that the National Music Centre here in Canada will have for many, many generations to come. And I'm just continuously inspired by your boundless energy and the fact that you're continuing along with more projects. You're now finished, New Orleans, the Springsteen archives, and I know that we're going to do some work together. I think we're finally ready after all these years.
Well,
and I'm just delighted to have you here in Calgary to see the National Music Centre, to show you around, and for you to just take it all in yourself.
Wow, it's a long time coming. I should have been here a long time ago. But I will close with this. You're lucky you're a good-looking guy, because I got to tell you, when you came in to the National Music Museum Alliance, and everyone was probably 15 years older than you, and like, is this someone's son here? Who is this guy? But all the women who were part of it, and mostly women, keep him. He's really, really cute. Oh, keep him. So you were able to stay, and thankfully that happened because everyone thought, wow, this kid can do something at some point. And then time passed, because it was a long time coming for institutions to be born, as you know. And I know everyone who I am still in contact with are so proud of you, what you've done, because you came almost wet behind the ears with a dream, right? And when people come with dreams and make them realities, that's something, because lots of people dream. They don't always become reality. But not only did you make yours become a reality, you have now become, as I said, you've become an inspiration for us south of your border here, because what you've done here is something that you've taken all that you've learned from the Alliance and from paying attention to the museums. You have it here, the creative process, the investigation of it, the Hall of Fames, all of these things under one roof, representing an entire nation. That's been the aspiration for all of us back home. We've not been able to achieve that yet. You have done it. So congratulations to you. It's an honor to have been a part of your life and your career. And when I do walk around here, I will do my very best to see that I could say, wow, I had a part in this, because that would make me really proud.
You have taught this team so much, and we're eternally grateful for it, Bob.
And we're going to, as we move forward, we're going to do business together. We're going to bring exhibits. We're excited to have exhibits come to us. We want to send some to you. The relationship now really has. I mean, it would have happened earlier. COVID happened, but now we're beyond that, hopefully, and we can really get down to business and really do some damage. What do you say?
We can make the National Music Centre an international
That's right.
music center.
Well, we want you to become a partner of ours, for sure, because as you well know, and I certainly do, the border is just a border. Culturally, I mean, you have given so much musically to our country, mine to yours, and there's the border means nothing. We're all of the same, and one exhibit that I'm going to be doing borrows so much of Canada that it's not funny, and I won't give that away. Maybe at some point you can tell them, but we're going to be seeing a lot of each other.
Yeah, and we'll look forward to that, seeing each other in a follow-up podcast.
That's
when
right.
we actually have some.
That's right. Here we will.
All right,
Good.
Thanks for being here, Bob, on the Amplifier podcast at National Music Centre. So great to see you. Welcome to Calgary and to Canada.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the National Music Centre's podcast, NMC Amplifier, with me, Andrew Mosker. We have lots of other great content online for free, including live performances, videos, articles, podcasts, interviews with artists, and more. Head over to amplify.nmc.ca and check it out. National Music Centre is a registered charity with a mission to amplify the love, sharing, and understanding of music, and we rely on donor support to achieve this mission. If you like the show or anything else NMC is doing, please consider leaving us a donation. NMC Amplifier is recorded on Treaty 7 in Mohkinstsis, Calgary, Alberta, Canada, at Studio Bell, home of the National Music Centre. To learn more about National Music Centre, go to studiobell.ca. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, au revoir.